Both Christina and I have a long background of volunteer engagement. Our paths crossed many, many years ago, kind of like early in our careers. We were both running volunteer centers. She was way up in the UP and I was in Lansing with our awesome partners at Capital Area United Way. And then from there, I went to Sparrow Health System and I was there for about 15 years, both when I was at the volunteer center and when I was at Sparrow. I worked very with state associations, did a lot of conferences, put on a lot of trainings and things like that. But one of my favorite things is actually volunteer recruitment. So I'm really excited about today and to be able to have the ability to share what we're learning with all of you. Would it be okay if I turned it over to Christina to her introduction?
Thanks, Melissa. I'm Christina Kobe. I apologize that you can't see me on screen today. The weather isn't the best where I am, and I find that my internet connection isn't the greatest when the weather's like this. So just to keep my bandwidth where it needs to be so that you can at least hear my voice and I can help Melissa manage the chat and the polls today, I have to shut my screen off or my video off. But my name is Christina Kobe. As Melissa stated, she and I have been longtime colleagues. I started my career as the founding volunteer center at United Way of the Eastern Upper Peninsula up in Sault Ste. Marie. I was there for 10 years to the day, and I loved every single day of managing volunteers and exploring what volunteers are looking for and what agencies need in their volunteers to get their work done. I transitioned over the last decade I now live downstate. I live between Big and Grand Rapids, and I'm privileged to work for the commission now as the volunteerism coordinator. What I will say is, on a personal level, I'm also an active volunteer with my church and with our local community center. And so that I believe it's really important for all of us to be involved in some way in volunteerism in our community, because it helps us with our work. You know, ask yourself, as you volunteer out in the community, what do you need as a volunteer? And apply that, if you can, to how you manage your volunteer management role and how you appeal to volunteers. Melissa, I'm going to end the poll today. So okay. If you haven't taken it, you have about 10 seconds left to answer that question that's up on the screen in front of you.
Right. Well, all right. Let's see. Let's take a look at our learning objectives today. We always start with some objectives here. We're going to share with you some trends impacting volunteer recruitment. And no doubt about it, you probably figured this out. The pandemic has had a big impact, hasn't it? So we're going to talk about that a little bit, not all just about the pandemic, but some general trends in recruitment. We're also going to talk about some generational differences among volunteers. This is one of the first times in our nation where we had so many generations that are in the workforce at the same time. And that certainly poses some challenges in motivations and recruitment techniques and recognition techniques for our volunteer managers. And then we're going to talk about breaking some bad habits of recruitment. I know that none of us do this, right? But we're just going to cover them just in case. And then we're going to talk about a new way to view recruitment. One of the things that you're going to hear me talk about in every single one of these, if you joined us last week, we talked about how you don't just jump right in to the end result. There's a lot of planning that's involved in this. And how do you do that? And then we'll talk about planning a recruitment strategy, and we're going to share some sound practices for recruitment throughout. So if that sounds good to everyone, let's continue here. So let's jump into those trends. So one of the really interesting things to me that's really taken hold, in part because of the pandemic, is that volunteers with special skill sets are more and more needed. And it's a twofold thing. A lot of our programs do work with corporate volunteers. The commission works with corporate volunteers. We're hearing some things loud and clear because of the pandemic, for example. We're hearing that our corporate partners are saying we are not engaging in face-to-face volunteerism right now. It's just too dangerous. We have to protect our workforce so we can keep our businesses open. However, that doesn't mean that it's going to stop. It doesn't mean it's forever. And it doesn't mean that we can't shift things and that they're not open to things. But our job as volunteer leaders is to create those opportunities that meet people where they are and help them still stay engaged. So some of that involves not only virtual volunteering or remote volunteering, but also how do you really think about how people's individual special skills can help you. Now, special skill set volunteering, professional volunteering has been around for a long time, as has virtual and remote, but it's been more narrowed down. So when you're thinking about this, we are going to launch something pretty soon called the Skills-Based Volunteering Platform. It is being launched with our corporate partners, and we are really excited. I should have told you this in the beginning when I was telling you all about those other trainings, but Christina and I are going to work with our colleague. Her name is Hannah Hoskins, and she is leading our corporate volunteer program. She is working right now as we speak on a training for you to understand skills-based volunteering. How do you recruit those people? How do you, what do we have in the pipe work? How do you use our platform that we're launching? And how do you, and you know, who's looking at this? All of those things. And what are some of the kind of activities that you could expect a skills-based volunteer to do? And it varies. I mean, we're not prescribing this to you. You think about what you need and think about as far out as you can get and just see what, you know, how great you could make this. It's about your creativity and being able to craft a message that attracts people, but we're going to help you with that. So that is coming up. We think we're going to do it. We are going to have a presentation to our partners in late October, and then we're going to offer that to all of you in November. So look for that. We're going to have information coming out. The other thing is on training. More and more, we are hearing that training is a key piece of engagement. One of those presenters that we're going to bring to you, in addition to doing a session on training, is how that's exactly his title, is how do you you know, training is a key component of volunteer engagement. And it's about how do you bring somebody in? He's an organizational and behavior specialist. So he's done this with lots and lots of other organizations, and he's going to share that with us. So we're really excited about that. But that training piece, a lot of it is, training is very different from generation to generation, and how people will, you know, will do training, whether it is remote, whether it's in person, whether it's hands-on, things like that. And then when we talk about the flexibility across the generations, everyone wants flexibility, but flexibility means different things to different people. And volunteer recruitment platforms. I don't know about you, but me, I always was challenged by this, but we've got some secrets for you. I would put things out on a few different platforms, and I would go I would jump from one to the other, and I would do it in spurts where I was really good at keeping things up. And then I would let things fall off on different platforms, whether it was, you know, Volunteer Match or whatever. We have some platforms that you can use, and we're going to talk about those. But the bottom line is this. Most volunteers, most younger volunteers are finding volunteer opportunities through platforms, including your social media. And social media is a big tool for you. And we're going to talk more about that as we go on. Who's looking at those things? What kind of things are they looking for? And how do you craft your message? But the bottom line is, volunteer platforms, they're our friend, but they do take our time, don't they? And then we have we have those differences in the generations that we're going to talk to in a minute. And then there is a real connection between your online presence, online giving, and online volunteering, or volunteering, attracting and recruiting volunteers. And we're going to talk about that for a few minutes too. If you could, just in the chat, tell me, what are your thoughts about this? What are your thoughts about these trends? Is this what you expected? Is there something that is a particular challenge to you? Is there something you see this and you're like, this really makes me excited, I want to learn more about it? Tell me what you think. Just put it in the chat about any one of these 6 items. And while you're doing that, we'll give you a minute to do that, I think. I think it's an important thing. So, and then actually, Christina will help me. It is what I expected. Good, good. Yeah. And you know, it is really interesting. It's one of those, oh, the social media plans. Great, great, Angie. It is social media. Yeah, it's our friend. I've got some funny stories to tell about that too. I'll go ahead and I'll move on, but still go ahead and put your little comments in there. Yeah. Yes, they are hard to keep up with so much change on the platforms. Yeah, okay. Well, let's just jump into those generational differences. So, well, like I said, this is the first time in our environment that we are dealing with really 5 different generations that have changed so much. And so I was going to give you some information about each one of these. And I think, you know, each one of us can look at our volunteer profile mix and we could probably take a look and say, oh yeah, that kind of does sound like this group or that group. But keep in mind, as much as we generalize types of volunteers, they're all individuals. And we have some slides later on about how when you're in an interview and you're hearing things, that even though they're a traditionalist, for example, they may have some traits of someone else, and it's totally fine. So keep in mind, it's don't judge a book by its cover, but listen. And this gives you some ideas about how to craft your message and hone in on who you're looking for, who has that skill set, who has the availability, who has the time, and who's most likely going to be the people that you attract. Okay, so let's talk about those traditionalists. These are folks that were born generally between 1901 and 1945. About 25% of this group still volunteers. And, you know, this is our greatest generation and the silent generation. These are folks that grew up in a time of economic turmoil, and they also grew up during the Great Depression and 2 world wars. These experiences shape who they are. They live with economic hardships, and they got through this through self-sacrifice and discipline, and it really shaped how they went into roles such as volunteering. These are folks that are very practical, they're patient, they're loyal and hardworking. They will do a job because a job is worth doing. They don't need to see necessarily immediate impact like younger generations do. And they generally respect authority. They like to have structure and discipline. And so these are also the folks that like to, you know, that are okay with having a delayed satisfaction. They'll wait for an award, like a service award, a 5-year service award. They'll wait for an opportunity to serve on a committee, things like that. They are about really building a legacy, and they are really the ones who really started a lot of the formalizing volunteer structures. So that is their legacy. Now, when we get to the baby boomers, I love the baby boomers. These are those folks that were born between 1946 and 64. They're sort of disruptors. That's who they were. And you know, you look down here at my little picture of them, and that was just kind of like, every time we hear about baby boomers, that's what I think. They're just kind of, they're the people who, they changed the world in a lot of ways. Interestingly enough, volunteering is oftentimes an encore to their career. They are the ones who built the idea of networking. So these business practices of like networking, which is very valuable to us in the nonprofit world, these things are very adaptable to their volunteer roles. And they are the ones who increase the work week from 40 to 70 hours a week. So we have them to for that. I'm kidding, but I'm going to let somebody in here. And like I said, they view volunteering through the lens of their career-driven lifestyles. They are very, they built careers, and they want to balance the various opportunities to find personal meaning now. Now their career is, where the traditionalists, they like to do a job because it needs to be done. I'm the one to do it. The baby boomers, they find personal meaning in those jobs. And they are a lot of times motivated by money, title, recognition, and like the corner office, you can think about that. Not all the time, and those are not bad things, but those are just things to help you think about when you're working with a boomer. It may be those things that motivate them, but they can also be great tools for you to help expand your volunteer base. Here's the other thing, engaging Generation X. I'm just going to take a guess that many of us are in this group. I know I am. They were born between 1965 and 1980. Now, this is the largest group of volunteers. And that might, for some of us, be kind of hard to believe, but believe it or not, almost like 1 in 4 of the Gen Xers tend to volunteer. It's about 36% of that population does volunteering. They're smaller in numbers, but that's something to understand. But they have useful skills and increasingly more time to give. I, for one, and Christina, for one, we have adult children. We're still very active in our careers, but we have time to volunteer, and we find different ways to volunteer. As we had children in the house, we were finding ways to volunteer with our children. And we were finding ways to do this differently. Us Gen Xers grew up in a world that was different than our parents and our grandparents. We were the Latchkey Kids. How many of those of us remember that term? And it wasn't uncommon for us to grow up in different kinds of households. Some of us had 2-parent households. Some of our parents were divorced, and some of us were raised by a single parent. I think if you think about your friends, you could probably, oh yeah, you're right. We all kind of had different situations. This led to us Gen Xers being independent and having an entrepreneurial spirit. So some of the things that you think about with Gen Xers, we don't really like people looking over our shoulders, but we do value immediate and ongoing feedback. So things to think about, like with that, would be like how do you give pretty consistent feedback and immediate feedback, building that into your volunteer training, building that into your support structures. Here's the other thing. We built the tech industry, okay? That's a big thing. We got into video games. So we like a fun workplace, and we appreciate multicultural settings. Now, as you're going to see, generations that came after us, our children, some of our grandchildren, they are building on these concepts. But you know what? We own that. The boomers, they own the networking. We own the tech. And then those other generations, as you're going to see, built on that. So think about that. We also really value those flexible schedules. And we also see a lot of our opportunities where we serve to be career building, and also things that involve our family. So we like that balance. The other thing to remember is that this generation tends to have portable careers. So think about that in terms of volunteering, that their career as a volunteer is also very portable. And we're going to give you some ideas that I know rock the boat a little bit, but I think it's very much in line with what folks expect. I should tell you, Gen Xers are most Gen Xers that have volunteered have also given through a social media request for an ask for a donation. So there's a real link there to think about that.
Hey, Melissa, I want to stop you for just a quick second. Sophia has shared a comment that I find really curious, and I love it, Sophia. If you could speak into this just a little bit. I'm going to share what she's written. She said, speaking as a younger person, social media has alienated me from the world around me. I am nervous about using it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Sophia? I think those on the call may learn a little bit about a younger generation here.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't expecting to talk about, but absolutely. It's quite an interesting thing that I've been really thinking about. And I think that there's been some activity around people of my age that are starting to, I would be considered a millennial. I was born in 95. And while I did have some moments away from the internet, my parents kind of delayed my access to it. I did still grow up with it, and I sort of like developed myself in these environments. And I look back on some of the things that I was exposed to, and I think that instead of, like the promise of the internet, being able to connect people from all over the world, I think it actually made me more alienated. Yeah, it's just a different dynamic, and it's sort of the illusion that while I did see a lot of things and I learned about a lot of things, I was also becoming more removed from what was actually happening right in front of me. So I guess that's sort of what I mean. It's the general sentiment. And there's a lot of incentive on the internet to keep you on the internet as opposed to take that and put it in the real world. So that's just sort of what I mean by that.
Thank you so much for that. Do you think that there's an opportunity there with someone of your generation that maybe feels the same way, to use social media as that bridge between what is happening on the internet and what is happening in their community? Meaning, by posting volunteer opportunities on social media, it can help you bridge that gap?
I guess that's the tricky thing, like I see, so this role of social media and their purpose is to be self-perpetuating. So I would find it difficult only because I think that ultimately that's the goal of those platforms, to just perpetuate the use as opposed to take the action somewhere else. If it was to, yeah, I just think that the in-person, like obviously, as a marketing tool, absolutely. But I see it as I get nervous about that because there have been plenty of events that I was, advertised that and really engaged in social media. And then I kind of forgot about it because it wasn't physical. And so it would just kind of stayed on the internet. It was self-perpetuating. But it is a powerful tool, but I currently see it as a challenge, and that's why I just get nervous.
Thank you so much for sharing. I learned something there. And what I think I learned, and if you don't mind, Melissa, just take another 30 seconds here. What I think I just learned from you is, even though I have young adult children, and I would have guessed before this session that the best way to get to them is to post my volunteer opportunities on social media, what I think I just learned is no, that's not how you appeal to them. But what I would also say is, okay, my brain asked, all right, well then who's on social media that I think would respond to a volunteer opportunity? It's people my age, Gen Xers. Because I am still, yes, I want control. I will take that and I will sign up in that event on Facebook or, Twitter or however you do it. And then I will show up. But I think you've taught me just now that the younger generation still needs a different approach. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And I would say that this still actually makes a lot of sense. This is not what you're saying, and what Linda says about her son is not out of the realm. I mean, it makes sense. Generally speaking, millennials do have more comfort. Subsequent generations from Gen X have more comfort with and knowledge of social media platforms. But when it really comes down to it, it's about making a connection. And that's, I think, what you're trying to say. So one of the things about millennials, they're in the workforce. They have graduated from college, many of them, or they're about to, and they have grown up with a sense of service. So with that, they are, listen to what we have to say about the millennials, and then let's come back to that, because I think that's an interesting thing. And I will say, you were born in 1995. I have a son who was born in 1995, and I will absolutely tell you, he loved the internet. You had MySpace. Gen Xer, I was afraid of MySpace. Who was that guy that was everybody's friend on MySpace? I didn't know this. I think this is kind of funny. Tom, yes, Tom, thank you. I found out that he had a friend named Tom. And why was Tom interested in my kid and being my kid's friend? And my son had to look at me like I was crazy and tell me, Mom, everybody's friends with Tom. So I have to tell you that, because that, to me, I was afraid. And I think, to your mom's point, your parents' point, they were afraid and they shielded you from that. I try to shield my kid from that. I have a 6 years difference between my first one and my second one. The second one, I don't want to say like I was just like whatever, but it was much different with the other one. So I'm with you. I understand why your parents did that. And yeah, so let's talk about those millennials. First of all, I want to give a caveat. And I don't know if this is your experience, but something that I've heard from some millennials, and I've observed it myself, millennials get a bad rap. And I want to caution all of you that don't do that. This is a huge generation of people, and they are growing. They're big in numbers, but they're also quite a few of them are volunteering, almost 30% of them. This is the first generation of their age that grew up expecting to change their communities. More than 1 in 4 volunteered just before the pandemic. Much like their parents, their baby boomers, they want to, what's different about the millennials from the baby boomers is they want to see an immediate impact of their work. They challenge the volunteer status like the baby boomers. So things like, and it isn't all just about, we do everything on the computer. There's flexibility. They're not here for a long time. They're here for a good time. They are here to, you almost have to think of a millennial as someone, because their careers and their motivations, the things that they're passionate about, you almost have to think about your engagement with them as being project to project, or like a contractor. And you keep them engaged by doing different things than you would have to for a traditionalist or a Gen Xer. So Sophia, for example, she's probably going to have a lot of different careers. She's kind of a free agent. And a lot of times the millennials, they want their work to coexist, and their volunteer work to coexist with things that are meaningful to them. They are a volunteer native generation. That's just the way it is. They grew up with the strongest interest in social media, but they also have a global connection. And think about this, and it's not, and we're going to talk about this, that just because, one person or 2 people or whatever are a millennial, it doesn't mean that these things always pertain to each and every group. But as a generation, they do have a pretty global awareness about things. And, sometimes it comes out where that they have been attracted to certain things because of things that they've experienced, maybe through the internet, maybe not, but that global awareness. And when you think about the subsequent generations, that has had a big impact too. This is a group that definitely values cross multi-ethnic participation and involvement. They value that. They also value green organizations. They're, like I said, they're passionate about the environment. So when you ask them to fill out 50 pieces of paper, that's probably not where they're going. And their goals definitely parallel their careers. You see, probably like Sophia. I mean, I hate to keep picking on you, Sophia, but what I think is really interesting is that she's in a nonprofit, a human service organization, and that probably does align with her desire to connect with people. So here's one thing when I said, don't blame it on the millennials. A lot of times people, I mean, I've heard people, I mean, how many others have heard people saying negative things about millennials? They kind of like the baby boomers have changed things quite a bit. They expect pretty immediate feedback. They also like to work in collaboration with others. And then when you see the Gen Z, they very much like to do that. And it's also, you think about if you were a parent and you saw how their academic careers were different from yours, we would sit in a class and we would hear a teacher or a professor demonstrate things to us. And then we were supposed to go do it on our own. Now, this is the group that was also involved with service learning. Those elements of service learning where you take a concept and you see it through how it works in the community, and it's hands-on, it's very tangible, it's very collaborative. Those are the ways that millennials like to work. And so thinking about that, putting them somewhere where they're on their own might not be the way they like to work, but having them work on bringing their special skill sets with that skills-based volunteering, that's very important. They like to have those connections, but you have to be careful about how those connections happen, because they're not the people who are coming to your office and sitting in your office for 4 hours once a week. They like the flexibility of doing it on their time and being able to do it in the location of their choice, and then being able to, touch base with you, give you feedback on the project, and for you to be able to help them understand, are they on the right track? And then how do they do this? So think about that. This is a really interesting group, because I love working with them, because there's a great deal of optimism, energy, passion, that global connection and awareness, and socially active. So I think about that, and that work has meaning for them, and their volunteer work also has to have meaning. What do you think about that? Does that challenge, does that seem to kind of fit when you think about this? It's a kind of a deep topic, especially with the millennials, because it's somewhat new to us. There's such a variety. We still have one more generation to go, but put your comments in the box, if you wouldn't mind, in the chat box. You're on the money. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Good, good. Well, let's talk about those Gen Zs. Those are the folks that were born in 97 to 2012. I also love these. I love people, so I love the differences in the folks. But about 26% of these folks tend to volunteer, these young folks. This is our youngest generation. Many of them are still students. Some of them are graduating college, and some are just beginning to volunteer, but most of them have volunteered throughout their educational careers. Both of my kids, especially the younger one had a requirement of 80 hours to complete, and it had to be much more than that because she was involved in other things that also had a volunteer requirement on top of it for the number of hours that she did. But the girl couldn't even graduate before she completed 80 hours of community service. So, and the idea about that is that they kind of grew up on community service. Both of my kids and I'm not to say that, you know, I'm kind of like Christina, we've been doing this a long time. And for us, we just kind of had to drag our kids along. So both of them have planted lots of trees and parks and done different things, but they will spend, this one is a little different. This group, Generation Z, it might not surprise you, they will spend on average about 5 hours a day on their phone. I have a funny story. I had I worked at Sparrow. We had a committee we were working with, and I had just probably on the cusp of a Gen Z volunteer, or not volunteer, it was an employee that was working for me. And my boss sends me a text. Why is she always on her phone during these meetings? I had to laugh at him. I said, you know what? I think you're showing your age. She's taking notes from the meeting on her phone. So I know, isn't that funny? I mean, I'm just like, huh? And I knew what she was doing, but the point is that we can be kind of negative towards some younger generations because there's some differences. And it was harmless, but it was one example of don't assume, don't make assumptions that, oh gosh, they're always on their phone, you know, they can't, you know, connect with anyone. They still want to have connections. They are a very, just like the millennials, just like the Gen X, every generation wants to have an ability to make a connection. The Gen Z, they do see their ability to be able to change the world. You see this when on college campuses, you see this in young people who are just kind of emerging, and they're finding their passions through things like our interview. I said that right, interview system that aligns youth with the UN national goals, and it helps them. That tool work through schools and nonprofits. If you ever want to learn more about that, contact us. We'll get you in. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it very much aligns with their passions and helping them find volunteer opportunities that fulfill those passions, so they can learn about it, they can contribute to those things. And I think that when we're looking at things like the movement with following George Floyd's murder, you saw a lot of activism. You saw a lot of people stepping up. And in various ways. And I know some communities experienced violence. That's not what I'm getting at. And I'm not saying that Gen Xers do that, but they're very, very aware of respect about different generations there and different ethnicities. They have a lot of acceptance and have a very much a global presence about them. And so think about that. They, almost 60% of Gen Zs have been motivated to volunteer or to donate through social media messaging. And then 1 in 5 say the impact on the world is an important issue in their daily lives. And 75% of them are interested in gaining work experience through volunteerism. And so think about that in terms of how we are forming our volunteer messages. So here's some takeaways. Generational understanding. I hope that if you take one thing away from this, it needs to help you tailor your experience and your expectations and your messaging to those folks. But it's also a tremendous opportunity. Never before have we ever had so many sets of skills, from the networking to being able to appreciate and to do those solid jobs that are hard to fill other than through our traditional volunteers, to our Gen Xers, to our Gen Zs. We've never had so many different sets of skills and different ages in our volunteer workforce. So take advantage of them. Every single one of them values flexibility in a different way. And then they all need meaningful work and experiences, but they all view those differently. And then service is focused on impact, especially from Gen X all the way down. They need to see that. And most importantly, us as organizations, we need to evolve. I was in a very traditional organization when I first came in at Sparrow, and we quickly realized, ooh, it was really set up. Great institutions were set up. Great systems were set up by traditionalists, but it isn't something that's always appreciated by a Gen X or a Gen Z or a millennial. So evolve. Here, let's talk about some bad habits. And I want to be conscientious of my time here. I love this topic, so it's easy to get off topic. Here's some bad habits. And I always put the nails up there because I think this is, it kind of shows you, you know, you can slip into these bad habits, but being aware of the fact that just because you have it, just because you have a brand doesn't mean people are going to spontaneously show up. More and more what we're seeing with volunteers, they're attracted to a cause, not your brand. So an older generation may really appreciate those kind of values, but younger people, they're going to be more affordable, more transferable. And so think about that. Expecting volunteers to stay. You know, it's nice if they can stay, but it takes a different set of skills on your part. As your role, whether you're big or small in terms of an organization or a volunteer program, you have to re-recruit people, and thinking about those motivations is a great way to do that. And we've got another slide on that. Expecting diversity without a plan for inclusion, that's a big thing. And we have a presentation we're going to give soon on how to build a really inclusive volunteer program. But I knew we didn't have time to delve into all of that right here. But I've got a couple of tips at the end. A size all recruitment message, as you hopefully understand, does not work. And don't blame it on those millennials. They're awesome people. They're wonderful people. We have Sophia, we have a few others in the room. They're incredible. And it's our job to understand where they're coming from. Okay, that's our job. And then failure to train without reinvesting in volunteers. We've got a lot to come in these sessions about that, but that's a big part of it. Now let's talk about our new vision. Okay, so I have this word cloud here, and I'd like you to take a look at it. You don't have to study the whole thing, but the idea that you get from it is, first of all, I would challenge you to do this. This is a challenge I have. If you haven't done this already, make a process chart of how people come to you. How do they fill out your application? How do they find you? All the way, like start it from how do they find you to filling out the application, all the way to the point where you interview them. We did this exercise at one time and it was for a younger group. That was a sad thing. And you know those traffic circles? Traffic circles are great for traffic, you know, but they're not great for a process for someone to easily understand, how do I get involved? So make sure you have a really clear process. There should just be a straight line when you're done, and it shouldn't be complicated. It should be easy. We adapted our crazy circle process to being a straight line with 4 steps. 4 steps, that was it. And then we even did more process improvement, and we got it down to 3 steps. Now there are lots of steps in between. We all know that, but we're making it easy. We're making a process that's easy. And we'll talk about that when we talk about some future sessions, but we need to have that in place. Identify the opportunity that you have and think as deep as you can about the kind of skills that younger people have, and what amazing things you could do if you could get a millennial or a Gen Z in, and how can you, even if you don't have the skill set, you don't have to be the expert, you could bring the expert in, but you're giving them the opportunity. And then how do you find that approach? And it's through targeted volunteering. It's through that, you know, the corporate volunteering, which we can help you with. You follow us for some other of those things. And then the clear messaging. These 3 things are things from Gallup, and they are across all generations. So it doesn't matter who you are, but this is the key to engagement. Understanding, what do I get from this? What can I give? And having that feeling of belonging and someone caring about them, and that they feel like they're a part. It's what everybody wants. So when you think about your messaging, and we have some examples of some recruitment messages later on, some of them really get to all three of these. So what do I get? What can I give? And a feeling of belonging. You create those three things and you consistently reinforce it. That's how you get people to stay engaged and stay with you. So the use of recruitment technology, you know what, it's just not going away. More and more, we're seeing that your social messaging, your social media, it's easy. That's another thing that's wonderful. But more and more, the social technology, the social media helps. And you know, it doesn't have to be hard. It can be kind of funny things. It can be lighthearted. When I worked at Sparrow, one of the most popular social media posts we ever had was this hospital copied mine. It was October. We always did a volunteer recruitment drive, and we said, you know, we were focusing on bringing your family in, and we had two therapy dogs. We had Sam. He was a therapy dog, and he brought his little brother in. They were from the same litter. I really don't know which one was born first, but Sam recruited his brother, and they were both therapy dogs. And I had a picture of both of them, and you know, some little thing about, you know, families volunteer together, and look at Sam and Burton. Sam, you know, recruited Burton, and that thing had something like, I'm not even kidding you, like 15,000 comments and likes. It was the hospital's biggest, most successful social media thing that they've had. And so think about that. It doesn't have to always be serious or anything like that. But think about this, volunteer recruitment is everyone's job. That should go across the board for everyone in your organization. And thinking about your social networks of your volunteers that you have now, what can they do? How can they help you? Now, when you're forming your volunteer recruitment messages, you got to have something that brings them in. Volunteer Pro had this great little formula here. Start with a big idea. Look at their formula. Any type of volunteer you see can solve a community issue by volunteering for your cause, because, and how it solves the issue. Here's their example. Anyone who cares about our community, our neighborhood health, can clean it up and can keep it clean and green by volunteering for West Town Greenway. We'll show them how to educate kids on easy ways to reduce pollution. We're going to send you these. I don't want you to have to take a look at every single one of them, but I'm going to point a couple of them out. Here's the other thing. Here's another formula. Sample recruitment messages. Statement of need. Seniors in your community are not eating a balanced meal and are suffering from malnutrition. How can you help? And here's the benefits. What I like about this is that it talks about connections with others, and you know, your learning skills, things like that. We're going to send these out, but I want you to take a look when we send these out at what these messages say, and you can adopt these and adapt these however you would like. But I think this was a really powerful one too. Some of them hit on all of them, some of them don't. For the sake of time, I'm going to hurry here. I've had a wonderful time talking with all of you. Now, we've talked about individual motivations very briefly. Now, when you see here, you can look at this, and I want you to, when you take a look at these slides on your own, I want you to look at this, because some of these things really, when you hear these kind of things, you know what the motivation is. And if you're really in tune with what your volunteer needs are, you can steer people the right way. Here's one. I'm going to go way over to the edge here, the protective motivations. I wish to immerse myself in order to forget about some of my troubles. Protective, it's a way to protect the ego from difficulties of life and give somebody something good to feel, you know, something to feel really good about. I want you to think about these and think about how you've heard people in volunteer interviews, and you hear these messages, and I'm sure, you know, you have probably done this, but this puts this into a concrete, you're understanding their motivations. And this transcends any kind of, you know, age group, things like that. But you can, they'll help you. Let's talk for a minute about technology.
Melissa, I'm going to stop you here. Let's take a quick poll.
Oh, sure.
You can go ahead and talk, and then I'm going to.
Well, she'll launch the poll and take this poll if you wouldn't mind. But we have some tools for you to use. We have our Get Connected. A lot of your communities get connected. Christina has been working tirelessly to create some shared agreements so that when we post something in our Get Connected, it can go on other ones. And so Get Connected is a very powerful tool to not only manage your volunteers, but also the recruitment messages. But it's a very powerful tool. We tend to use it just for the recruitment, but keep in mind that if you really want to get into it, you can use it as a volunteer management platform. We also have the nonprofit guide coming soon, and we will have some trainings on that as well. Social media, I can't say that enough. Last time when we talked, some of you had used your organizational website to put your opportunities up there, your applications. Not everybody can do that. We understand. But, maybe that's one of the goals that you have is you find a really, tech savvy volunteer who can create that for you. As promised, skills-based volunteering is coming to you and you're going to love it. And then also the Board Connect platform is coming. And we'll talk more about that. But for the sake of time, I want you to know that we have a lot of tools that are responding to the needs and the trends that are happening in our state and to the world of volunteering. I want you to think about some other ways to recruit volunteers. These are some things that are kind of tried and true, but also a little outside of the norm. The National Days of Service. Host one of those community-wide projects. We always have project support available from $100 to $1,000, and we do it 3 times a year. MLK is our next one, Global Youth Service Day, and 9/11 Day of Remembrance. But a really savvy volunteer coordinator will use that opportunity to motivate and to engage those participants to do, new people to the organization to volunteer. So I encourage you to do that. And I can help you with that. We can always talk about that. Participate in recruitment events, especially multicultural events in your communities. And then the idea is using your network and seeing who can help you get into those and identify those for you. And then, you have this picture here. I love this because she's obviously very engaged with those folks. But one of the things that I would do is I would never be sitting down. I would use our volunteers. We would get out there and we would have so much fun engaging and getting to know people. And it was about those personal connections. It was always about personal connections and getting to know people. Sometimes we were on the other side of the table and asking, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about volunteering or, giving some time and having your elevator speeches ready. Some people say, well, I can't until I retire. Yeah, well, we know most of the people that are volunteering now are not retired. And then partnering with other organizations to spread the awareness. We did a lot of things with multiple organizations to recruit volunteers and also to share volunteers. We would go in on projects with other organizations. We always kind of tend to think we don't want to give up our volunteers. It's not about giving up or sharing or, maybe someone's going to go somewhere else. And if they do, hey, they're portable. They're going to do that. And so thinking about that, being creative with community centers, physician offices, career centers, local corporations, and professional associations to attract volunteers is awesome. Think about as far out as you can about who are these people, what do we need, how do we get to them, and then think about that. I actually had some really, not even in my healthcare career, I had some really great connections with physicians who would help me connect with awesome volunteers. And you think, like, how is that? Well, I did have one volunteer who the physician sent over to a recruitment event that we were doing. And it was kind of funny. Years later, she said, you know, you saved my life. I was so depressed. But she was a phenomenal volunteer. We are really close to the 1:30 hour. So I want to just be careful. Use your resources and relationships to even like launch a peer-to-peer text campaign to get people to volunteer. People don't say yes unless they know you want them to say yes. And what are they volunteering for? So craft those messages. And then I want to say this, recruitment is one thing, retention is another. We are 1 minute over. I am going to be really quick. Be ready for that new volunteer. Engagement is everyone's job, and roles should evolve over time and help people grow so they can stay in those roles. That's how you get people to stay. Not a promise that everyone's going to stay, but hey. And then the volunteer life cycle needs to involve a great deal of feedback. And we have some trainings that are going to touch on that, and recognition that is personally meaningful. When you're in a small organization, I think it's easier to do that than in a big one. Whew, this was like a marathon, folks. But here's, we are going to give you some recruitment planning tools, and we'll send them out like we did last time. I want to remind you, this is our website. You can stay connected to us through this link, which you'll have. And then we want to make sure that your organizations are in our nonprofit guide, and we'll check on that. But that's another awesome recruitment. Is there, Christina, can I turn it over to you? Do we have?
You can, Melissa, great job. Thank you so much for taking the lead in today's session. Clearly you're passionate about recruitment, and you bring with you a wealth of knowledge. I think our participants also enjoyed, especially our millennials. I think they enjoyed hearing that we at least know nothing's their fault, right? We are all
We love you.
We are all shaped by our generational differences. It's just a matter, when you're in the volunteer management realm, it's a matter of appealing to each individual audience. We are going to ask that you take our evaluation poll here at the end. I'm going to launch it right now. We'd appreciate hearing from you, whether or not today's session was valuable to you, and whether or not you took enough lesson away that you'll be able to implement that in your work with volunteer management. So take just a moment to do that. Remember that this session has been recorded. We will be sending out a recording link as well as some follow-up tips and tools that can help guide you to implement what you've learned here today. We really appreciate you being with us. It's always a good group, always great to see people from all over the state of Michigan, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place, right here in Zoom.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your kind comments. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to do this with all of you. And it would be great if we could all be in a big room together, but hey, this is like the next best thing. And don't forget that Christina and I are always here for you.
Please don't leave before you've taken the poll.
Hi, Melissa, Christina. Thank you guys so much. This has been wonderful. My name is Khadija. I'm with Michigan Community Resources. I really thoroughly enjoyed this, and I found it to be helpful. Really looking forward to further trainings. I put a question in the chat. I don't know if you all saw it. I just wanted to know, is it possible that we can receive copies of the entire PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Certainly,
yeah, that's
certainly.
exactly what we will do. Yeah, we did that last week.
Thank you.
Really excited. We forgot to push record last time, so we sent out the PDF. Hopefully that worked for everyone. We're going to re-record the last one, and we can send these out as a PDF too, along with the recording. And then someone said that they'll be out next week. Yes, and we can definitely talk later. You know, this doesn't have an expiration date. We're always here. We're always happy to hear from me. You can email us, you can call us, things like that. Yes. And then these will be recorded too, so you can listen later if you've signed up. I think we'll just send it to everyone who signed up. They'll get the recording and the slides.
All right, we are at 1:36
Thank you so much.
p.m.
Appreciate you both.
Yes,
Absolutely.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us next week and throughout the rest of the series. Always be mindful that the Michigan Community Service Commission is releasing our capacity building resources, not just in training sessions such as this. We have our online conference that's coming up at the end of November and December 1st, as well as future training available. So thank you for tuning in, and watch for more resources from Volunteer Michigan.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Oh, good.
Great job, Melissa.
Thanks. Do we still have some folks taking the
So
poll?
I closed the poll. We had 40 participants in it. It sat at
Wonderful.
39 for several minutes, so I just went ahead and stopped it.
Okay.
If you want to see the quick results, since you're a Gen Xer and you want to see those, you know, you want to see how you did, or you want immediate feedback. So it met their expectations, 85%.
Can we end the session?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you for being here.